started? Or introductions?
Yeah, let's introduce ourselves.
Yeah. We are 3 of the 4 high school counselors. One of us couldn't be here today, but my name is Jennifer Dorn, and this is my 7th year here at KIS.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mr. Dale Samuels. I think I may have introduced myself to most of you already, but if you don't know, I'm from the UK. This is my first year at KIS as a high school counsellor, but I have been in Korea for many years at another international school doing counselling previously.
Hi everyone, my name is Sana Mohammed, and this is my first year at KIS as well. But prior to this, I was working as a school counselor in the state of California for about 9 years.
I just realized when you mentioned introducing yourselves, this might be your first time seeing our real faces. I think the last time that we met to do the course registration meetings, the mask mandate was still on. So, and I also can see a lot of your faces for the first time. Or some of you I have known for a long time, and I'm seeing your face for the first time in many, many years. So it's really nice. So thank you again, those of you who just came in, thank you again for joining us this morning. And if you're going to watch this video at home, thank you for watching our video. We call this presentation Mythbusters because we, together as a department, regularly hear stories and things that parents and students have heard. And they will come in and say something, and there's usually some sort of hesitancy in saying, and they'll say something like, I heard blah, blah, blah. And it's a really great opportunity. I'm always so thankful when kids or parents come in with that question that they have. But when we're having the discussion about where did that idea come from or where did that story come from, it's really quite fascinating the way that gossip and myth works, right? So I think we really love kind of discovering what's at the root of that question. So that we can address it with some facts or some resources that will really help you get to the bottom of it. So this is kind of a fun presentation for us and kind of a fun for us to be able to see the questions and the kinds of things that you're hearing.
Yeah, I heard this is non-college related, but a very interesting myth from yesterday. Actually, I heard that varsity players believed that there were spots for 2 freshman basketball players every year on the varsity team. And again, that was a myth. And as coaches, we were able to kind of dispel that myth. So it's just interesting the type of things that people hear and kind of accept as truth. And where those things come from is always really interesting.
So when kids come to us and parents come to us and they hear these things, it's a really great opportunity for us, as well as giving them the answer, but to have that conversation about where are you getting your information and which information are you believing to be true. So just like we're trying to encourage your students to really be thoughtful about what they're hearing and does that make sense and where's the truth in that, we also really want to encourage you to really get down to the source as well. So we'll just get started with some of these myths that we hear. Myth number 1, this is something I hear a lot and something I think a lot of parents and kids are really worried about. College admissions is getting more competitive. And every year that I hear this, college admissions is getting more competitive for a different reason or for a different group of people. Yeah?
Yeah.
This is a long slide to read, and you can read this after we send this to you. I'm not even sure you can read it from your seats. There are some truths in the idea, but we really want to encourage you to actually look at the numbers and see what that means to you. There are some ways that application numbers worldwide can be tracked. One of them is in, for example, we put the statistics in there for a common application. And they're at, what year, 2019-20? There were 2 million applications. And last year, there were 2.8 million applications. So statistically, that is true. There are more applications on Common App. And what this leads to is universities saying, oh, we had 50,000 more applications, and so now our admissions rate is 14%. It used to be 20 and now it's 14%, or it used to be 50 and now it's 45%. And just looking at those numbers, I think we can interpret them or feel different ways about them, but we really want to encourage you to look at another piece of data, and that's some data from KIS. And we try to share this out every year. We share out in the springtime when we have more data. We share out the admissions rates that KIS students are experiencing. And so even though there is this larger number of applications worldwide and the admission statistics are decreasing, our students are still being accepted at relatively the same rates over the last 10 years that we look at the data. Every year, there's a little bit of movement up and a little movement down, but that isn't on a large scale, and it isn't indicative of anything in particular other than some things we're going to talk about coming up. But for us at KIS, our students continue to be very, very competitive applicants. They're still really highly admissible and getting into the universities at the same rates. What's different about what we talked about, those statistics, is there might be more applications, but are they all academically as admissible as our students here?
Yeah, like just to kind of add on to that point is that there are going to be a lot more people applying to universities, which obviously is increasing the numbers, but the quality of our students and the quality of our applications and the schools that we're applying to, it doesn't change the amount of acceptances we're getting. So yes, overall, the number appears like the amount of students getting admitted is less, but in fact, because the quality of our students is the same and just as competitive, actually the number of KIS students getting admitted to those universities isn't changing. It's just the amount of worldwide applicants is increasing.
The other piece of information is about likely targets and reaches. And for those of you, I'm not sure if any of you, I didn't ask, have older children or maybe graduated children, this might look a little bit more familiar. For those of you who don't, this is something to look forward to. It's very exciting. These are screenshots taken from Maya Learning, which is a platform that we use to help the students apply. And this is two different, we call these scattergrams. This is just KIS data. So these are the kinds of pieces of data we really want to encourage you to start looking at and using when it comes time for this to be a little bit more relevant for you. In helping your children choose universities that are very appropriate. I see you guys, yeah, you guys are getting it. That's really good. That these kinds of pieces of data that are available to you in Maya Learning should be really reassuring to you, should be really helpful to you through the whole college process, starting in 9th grade when you're just starting to explore some universities and what things look like, when you're talking about helping your children create their college list that they're going to apply to, and making sure everything is really well balanced. This is an example. These two scattergrams are from the same university. The top left is for the 4 years, 2016 to 2019. And you can see there the green dots are kids from KIS who have been admitted. And the red dots are kids who have been denied. And so when you look at that top left one, which is the earlier years, the 16 through 19, you can see it follows quite closely to the average GPA line. Do you see that it's just below 4.0? I can't really tell exactly what that is, but it's just below 14 4.0 and maybe is at a 1,500 for the average SAT score.
That's
Obviously,
the blue cross on the graph.
the little blue, yes.
So that's the average.
And you can see the admits follow very closely across the GPA line. I saw you guys noticing that. The GPA at this university is much more important than the SAT score. And then if you look at the more recent one that's on the bottom right, you can see that the average GPA and SAT are still the same. But what I notice about this graph is that a lot more students who are very far away from the average GPA have applied to this school. Potentially, or perhaps they were thinking, oh, this other student got in, so I'm going to apply. But you can see a wider range of GPAs that are quite a bit lower, and so they have applied to this school. Sometimes that adds to some confusing statistics that you might take away and say, oh, this school is more selective, or if you look at that earlier one, there were more kids that got in. But if you look at the kids who were academically admissible to that university, it still is the same information. That's how these can be used to help you come up with a good list for your child. The other thing about the bottom right picture is you notice that little cluster of applications here, where the students may have been thinking their test scores were more important than their GPA. And you can see by the data that's not actually true or helpful at this university. They really value the GPA.
It's hard.
Yeah, I can't stand up just to show this, sorry.
Language
So as you can see, like some of these students here were very close to a 1,600, almost a perfect score. But when we look at their GPA, it's in the 3.2 range, 3.3 range. So there was perhaps a thought that a fantastic, almost perfect SAT score was going to be enough to get them into this school. But we can see that it's the people with the GPA and who are getting more admitted to these schools. So I just think that's a point just to kind of stand out.
Which might debunk another myth of SAT being maybe more of importance compared to GPA, but it's definitely not.
And this is a point also that we would encourage you when you're looking at these kinds of things with your kids and helping them make decisions on their time, which is another slide, helping them make decisions on their time of what really is important. So by looking at these graphs, you can really see that the testing is less important than the grades that the kids are earning.
Myth, it's harder / it's easier for international students to get into US universities. And just as the 2 points, yes and no, it depends on the school. And so it's really important to consider what school is being applied to. Some schools are very specific about how many spaces they have for out-of-state students and international students. So off the top of my head, I know some universities have like 18% of their kind of spaces are for out-of-state and international students. So that's going to be, again, more selective and perhaps more difficult university for international students specifically. On the flip side, there are universities who are trying to attract more international students. Again, I know of some universities that have a 7% international population, and they want to increase that population to 10% or more than that. So when they're considering their freshman intake and looking at applications, they're going to obviously be seeing international students as more favorable, wanting them to come to university. So for those particular students in that university, it is going to be easier or less challenging to go into those schools. So yes and no, and it's going to be about researching and understanding what that particular university is looking for. And sometimes that information is not just there,
Yeah.
and we don't know. Sometimes you do know. And so it's really important as well for students to these are grade 8 and 9, but even going into grade 9, to go to our university visits when the universities are coming to these schools, to our school, sorry, and the students have the opportunity to go to those visits to learn more specifically about that university and what they are looking for, because that can give an insight as to if it's going to be more challenging or less challenging for an international student.
We would really encourage students not to take one little bit of information or experience and then turn it into one of these myths like, oh, it's harder for international students, because it's just very, very specific at each university. There's on the slide the idea of institutional priorities, and those are things that change from year to year at the institution, and they're not things that we know about or anybody knows about. Those are the things that within the university, they're really making an effort to increase this or that or the other thing. And it changes from year to year depending on the applicants and the students at the school. So there is no easier or harder.
Just depends.
This quote here, this is from the UC website, which I hope all of you go home and do a little bit more looking. The UC website has a bunch of information. They are really, really open about the students they admit, some numbers, some demographics, and it can be really, really helpful. There's too many for us to put here, but I really liked how they summarized what they're looking for, and maybe those of us on the public side help to explain what we see. And they just say, because the pool of students who apply is different every year, the level of academic performance is different, which makes a lot of sense because they don't know who's going to apply and what their applications look like. So there is not one certain measure or one certain thing that they're looking for. It really depends on the kids who apply and the majors that they're applying to, and the number of spaces they have, which can be impacted by how many kids they admitted last year or how many kids decided to transfer out. So things are always moving and changing.
Myth. My child must write a research paper to get accepted to a top university.
Have you heard this one? We hear this one a lot,
She's
so much recently, right? Yeah.
All right, so this is definitely a myth. Research papers take lots of years and dedication and time and energy and knowledge to write, and so universities may see maybe some students have done this research paper, but they may not necessarily take that as a research paper. They might just say like, oh, this was a project that the student worked on for a couple weeks in a summer program and got more knowledge in this matter, right? But research papers tend to take a lot more time than that. And I think they focus more on the piece of extracurricular activities, right? It's one part of the application. They want to know more about what the student is like personality-wise, what their interests are, what their strengths are, what are they going to bring as an individual or as someone coming from somewhere else, and what are they going to bring to the campus? What is going to improve the university's community? I think universities really want to see what students are passionate about, and if the student is passionate about music or bugs or sports, right? They want to know more about that versus anything else, and that kind of gives them more insight about what the impact is going to be from the student versus seeing, they wrote this, quote unquote research paper or published on a website that was created by the student themselves, right?
This is when we really encourage you as adults to help your children understand this. Think about your time at university, or I know a lot of our parents work in science or research involved fields. And think about research papers or research that you have read as an academic student or in your work. those research papers take those PhD, the professors, years to put that research together, years to do the study. They're peer-reviewed, they're published. There is, I think, a misunderstanding on our students' end that they could go to a summer program and write a research paper. And I am really asking that you as parents help your children understand what a research paper is and your experience, and maybe look at some together. For those students who are taking the capstone classes here, that is very long research that they're learning about. And so really looking at the vocabulary that we're using, and also remembering there just is no checklist. It's not like, oh, check, I wrote this research paper in 2 weeks and then we're going to move on to the next piece. It's really like Sana was talking about, like, how does the application all come together? How does this child spend their time? What's their story and what kind of things are they interested in? There is no right or wrong piece of the application. This is one that we've been hearing so much more about recently. I think there might have been an increase in businesses that are offering to partner with students on some research papers. So I'm not sure exactly where this rumor is starting from, but we really want to encourage you to help your students think through what that actually means. And looking at this, again, I'm not sure you can see this, we'll send out these slides. This is from a survey of universities. This was pre-COVID, I do want to say. We're hoping that this institution will do this again. But extracurricular activities, which would include a research paper, are only important to 6.4% of the universities that were surveyed in the US. So extracurriculars as a whole are significantly less important than the other pieces of the application, like the grades and the courses. And again, especially for those 8th grade parents, grades and courses are really the most important thing in any student's application. So instead of spending time on some of the other things, the grades and the courses would be always where we encourage you to spend your time.
Yeah, I think just supporting, because your students are younger, helping them learn more of those time management skills and planning and organizing, and focusing on that foundation of when they start high school is going to definitely help as they get older, especially with the pandemic and the gaps and some of those time, like learning gaps, but as well as social gaps, and a lot of those little pieces that you learn in school. We've been noticing as well since we've been back in school that even our older students are lacking a lot of those skills that are going to help them be successful in the future. So I think really, really focusing on that with your students as they're getting older.
And happiness. We want your kids to be happy.
I have a question actually. For the secondly, there's grades in college prep courses. Can you give us a little more explanation or examples? What is that?
A college prep course could be like an AP course, essentially, advanced placement class. So that's advanced placement. So for example, like AP English language or AP calculus, or so if your students in 9th grade, they probably don't have any AP classes yet, but potentially might take one next year. So that's one example of a college prep course.
But I see the subject versus word as an AP too. What's different there?
So where?
The subject test scores.
Oh, that's
for
the
AP and
actual
IB.
exam score, I think, right? Yeah, so the subject test scores is for the AP exam. So all AP courses will have an AP exam at the end of the year in May that's hosted through the College Board organization. That's the same org that hosts the SAT. So that's the difference there, is that one is talking about the actual score that they have on the exam versus the class.
So the importance is that the grade that the student is getting throughout the year in the AP course is what is most important.
Yes.
In school,
Yes.
they will have that one exam, and that has a lot less significance on the application decision when it comes to that point.
Other college prep courses are, we would kind of lump them together as core courses like math, science, social studies, English, and world language. Those are all college prep courses. AP is part of all of those subject areas. College prep courses is, would you say, everything except for the certain electives. And it can change depending on your kid's major and what they're looking at. Like if I am going to be a biology major and I took the art credit, because we require an art credit, and I didn't do very well in art, I'm not super strong, but I took it and I really gave it my best. My university might not really be looking at that because it wasn't like a preparation course for me to get into high school or to get into college. Which leads us to this question. Should my child take AP exams outside of school? Or will it help them get into university? No.
Don't do it.
No. Because usually when we talk to kids who are doing that, they're self-studying or they're taking this course someplace else, and it's not on their transcript at KIS, and there's no way for them to show their learning other than the score in the end. Typically for US universities, the scores are not even used for admissions decisions. It's the grade in the course. They want to see how the kid is learning and doing through the whole year, right? The actual test that they take in May is not significant. The test scores at US universities can be used potentially for earning college credit, depending on what university they go to and which tests they took, or it might be used for placement. Like if I got a really high score on the AP English language, I might not have to go into like my beginner English course. I might place out of that and be able to go to the next level. But the actual test score is not the important part in US admissions. It is important, a certain number of them are important if you're applying to Japanese schools or UK schools, Australia, I think they ask for 3. But those are scores that they can get from inside school, and it's definitely not the more the better. They want a sample of the scores that they're taking in their classes here. So we would never advise kids to take an AP test outside of school. Also because when kids are doing that, it's taking time away from these really important things. If your child is studying for, I don't know how long it takes to study for an AP by yourself, but if your kids are doing that, think of what they could have done with those, 100 hours. Is that too much? I don't know. However many hours. They could have read a book. They could have gone for a walk with you. They could have done a different sport. Got more sleep, yes. They could have gotten more sleep.
But unfortunately, because now that SAT2 has been eliminated,
Yeah.
a lot of parents feel that they're getting information from other sources.
Yeah.
That now AP scores are even more important, and that they're encouraged to take more AP classes and go to make up an SAT.
Yeah. So SAT subject scores weren't important either. That's the confusing part.
That's why they're gone.
I think-
That's why they got rid of them, because they
Yes.
don't matter as much.
Yeah, I would really, this is again part of good decision making. When I have had some individual conversations with parents and students about this, I would really like to ask the question, who's telling you that they're more important? And what interest do they have in talking you into signing up for an AP course outside of school? In my experience in talking to students, it's often the people selling the courses. They're telling you that you need them because they conveniently work at a place and they want you to sign up for it. So they have to tell you they're important, and they have to tell you how much your child needs this, and that they'll be behind if they don't have it. They have to tell you that because that's their business and that's what they're selling. So we really want to encourage you as adults to be good decision makers and say, why are they telling you this, right? Did you want to? No.
Yeah, a different point.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Okay.
Yeah?
Okay.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Really think about who's telling you that. The subject tests weren't important, and now that they've gone away, there's certainly universities are not looking to fill that void with an AP subject test. There's not a good reason for you to do that. Also, one of the points to that is when your children are in 12th grade and they're taking, usually that's when kids take the most AP tests, their admissions decisions are made without those scores. The universities don't even care. And that's when they take 3, 4, 5 AP tests is in 12th grade. And the universities are making those choices without knowing what the scores are. So I think that's a really good indicator as well for students who are really worried about the AP exam scores to look at the decisions that are being made without the exam scores.
Another thing I hear and from parents is my student or my child is already academically high-flying and doing great. And so I want to take additional tests to further challenge my student and to kind of show that my student is even more high-flying than what he or she already is. But as you can see, that the most important things are the grades in all courses and the grades in college prep courses. And so my encouragement is to not seek further academic prowess in AP tests or external testing, but to really use that time, as Ms. Dawn was saying, to put into other passions and the passions of the student, because that is then what makes a student really stand out. Your child is already fantastic academically and doing great things academically and displaying the important things such as getting great grades in their courses and great grades in their college prep courses. They're already displaying that. So they don't need to do more of that because they've displayed it already. Where can they now put their attention to show that they can excel in other areas, in their own passions or in their character, or how they've grown as a person and developed as a person? These are the things that are now going to make them stand out beyond the grades because they're already standing out so much in those grades. So I think that's another thing that I just wanted to kind of hone in on.
Some of the top universities will say there is an academic level at which the kids are admissible. And typically, most of the applications at these schools will be academically admissible. And once they're academically admissible, then that's kind of it,
That's the check mark.
right? Like,
Yeah.
you got it. Then the discussion goes to the other pieces of like, do I want this kid on my campus? What is he going to do on my campus? How are they going to add to our campus community? So there isn't a like ranking system within the academically admissible. Once they've determined that your child would be successful on campus, fantastic. Then let's look at the other pieces. So doing more of it doesn't help them get to any different place because they already know that they're academically admissible.
One story that I got told from an admissions officer was once they determined that student was academically admissible, they were looking at what that student did, and one thing that the student did was walk across Singapore. And they had literally walked from one side of Singapore to the other, and this really stood out to that admissions officer. This is not to say that all of our kids should be walking across Singapore, but it is then saying what is it that is different about that student once they've reached that level.
We've also, when some university reps come, they'll kind of talk about the same thing, like, why is this kid taking so many tests? Like, what else could they be doing? Like, is that what their whole afternoon looks like? Taking a test is not a skill that you need in university. That you don't have to be a good test taker at university. They at university are going to want you to be much more creative thinking and motivated and engaged in the community, not to be able to just take more tests. So some universities will feel like, why are they taking so many tests? And it actually might count against applicants. Which I think brings us to the next question. More testing. We've heard both things in the myth story. It matters so much. And then on the other side, it doesn't matter at all. And I think the answer is it depends. As always, right? I feel like that's always our answer. It just depends. If you're... Oh, I'll just wait a second and say that after. This is a quote from University of Washington. And at their university, testing has never been that important. They want to know about the other pieces of the application. So going officially test optional because of COVID really didn't change much about their philosophy. They still feel the same way. They're really looking at those other pieces of the application. And the other pieces really are the focus. And so for universities in the US, if your kid is a great test taker and they take the test and you feel like it reflects positively, it's within the median 50%, then your kid should submit the test. If your kids have taken the test and they're not good test takers, because some people are not good test takers, that's not how they show what they know, and they've taken it a couple of times and it's not in that median 50%, and you as a family don't think it represents what your kid knows, then you shouldn't submit your test. And it's really that simple. It really is an individual choice for each child and the universities that they're applying to. If it adds to it, then you should add it. If it doesn't add to it, if it's not a good indication of your child's ability, then let's move on and focus on the other things that do show your child's ability and strengths.
And between now and by the time your students are
Yes.
juniors in high school, which is when they should be planning to take the SAT in their junior year, that the test will most definitely change by
Yes.
then. I think I was telling them when I was in high school, I think it changed every year that I was in high school. Either it was scored differently, the points were different, and so it changed every single year. And even now, right, like there's been so many changes in the last few years. So between now and your students' junior year, it's going to change so much. The university's policies will probably change between now and then. So it's one of those things to just keep kind of looking into as your students get older, but not to really stress out or worry about it at this point. I think I know we keep reiterating it, but really having your students focus on their transition into high school, focus on their academics and their foundation, and then focusing on what they're getting involved in the beginning of their start of high school, because the universities really like to see that consistency over a long period of time of like, oh, this student's been involved in, I don't know, volleyball since like 8th grade or 9th grade of high school and like up until senior year versus, oh, they took, you know, this test and that test. And so just, you know, kind of making sure of reminding your students to also not worry so much about it, because we see a lot of students really, really stressed out about testing, and we don't want them to be stressed out about SAT testing or AP testing. We want them to be more focused on their grades and their exams in school as well.
And like that scattergram that we showed, those really high scores don't make up for the other things that they didn't do. And your kids are way more interesting than that.
Yes.
Right? They're way more interesting. And so to develop that and encourage those kinds of things is really important. Those are the things that are going to help your kids stand out. And then we just put the slide there. There's all these other questions that we were going to try to like address, or if you have questions here. But maybe this is a good time to take a pause. we recognize, and I think it's really important for you to take a minute to recognize the school and you as their family are really just wanting what's best for your kid. Really wanting to help them get to a place where they have a lot of options. And I think that it can be really overwhelming and really confusing when you have different groups of people telling you that you need to do this and you need to do the other thing. But as the adults in that relationship with your children, as the adults, really take a minute to think about, well, wait a minute, where am I hearing this information? Where is it coming from? And what is that person's interest in telling me this? Is it to sell me something? Is it to make me feel fearful? Is it to make me feel like I'm not doing something I should be doing? And really the decisions that you make for your family should be a really good decision for your family. Not for anybody else, or not because anybody else is doing it or not doing it. It should be in the best interest of your child and their well-being. So really taking a moment to pause and think about that information. I think that as parents, you have a lot of influence on how your children are feeling about all of these things. And chances are, if you're feeling stressed or confused or really, really worried about, am I doing the right thing? Am I telling my kid to do the right thing? Then chances are really good if you have a chat with your kid, they might be feeling the same way. They might also be feeling really stressed and really worried. And so taking some time to connect with your child about these things and questions they have and what do they think and what do you think, and making some good decisions together might be a really good first step to take. And also the reminder, just going directly to the source of the information. So Maya Learning, for example, if you're in 9th grade and you have not used Maya Learning, let's chat, because all that information is available to you, and I think it can be really helpful to parents to really look at the data and really calming to parents. If you're in 8th grade, it's just something to look forward to next year. But really looking at the source of the information, or going to the university's websites and looking up the information directly. Or this spring, as our second group of university visits start to happen, we are trying to schedule more visits for parents. We just scheduled one for Y Canada. So coming to some of those university visits would also be going directly to the source to hear right from them what they're looking for and why Canada might be a good idea for your child.